I'm going to use this pile of Lego to explain the different stool tests that we use at Mosaic Medical and why we might choose one over another. There's a lot of testing available now that you can just buy on the internet, and it's really varied as to what you might actually receive and also how useful it is, given that the whole point of testing is to either improve your health, improve your future health, or treat a condition you already have. So traditional stool testing is all about culture. So culture would be where you take a microbe, you put it in a culture medium, and then you see what grows. Now, for that to work, you have to have enough of the microbe to be able to see it. You also have to have a microbe that remains alive by the time it gets to the laboratory, and a culture medium, which is food essentially for that microbe. Now, sometimes we still use culture. Sometimes culture is exactly what we need, because sometimes if you have an overgrowth of a pathogen, so let's call it like a weed in our microbiome garden, then it's really helpful for us to know what that weed is and what we could use to treat it. Now, whether that's a specific herb or a medication, you can actually look with something that's alive to see what agent might be useful for treating it. So that's the traditional form of stool testing. Things then move forward, and then we have something called quantitative PCR. Now, what that does is it looks at a little genetic sequence that's unique to either a specific microbe or a family of microbes. So for that, I want you to imagine going in with a PCR probe and looking for all of the red Lego pieces in my analogy here. So we've got all the red Lego pieces, and these might be one family of microbes. Now, you might want to get more specific, so you can count the number of red Lego pieces using this quantitative PCR method. But you might want to get more specific and say, how many little red blocks such as this are there within this? And that would be the specific species within the red Lego family. I hope that makes sense. What's coming now that's become a little bit of a game changer when it comes to stool testing is something where we say, it may not be the red Lego that's causing the problem or that's putting you at risk. It might be the combination of the amount of pink and purple Lego that you've got. Or it might be the fact that in your stool you have a number of species that only really should exist in the mouth, for example. So that's when we start to look at this whole genome testing. There's 28,000 different species you might have in your stool. So something coming along and saying, actually, what's actually there? What is making up this whole microbiome? That's when it gets really powerful. So in doing that sort of stool testing, we can then say, how many of these oral species do you have in your stool? Overall, do you have a really disproportionate amount of one microbe? Do you have a wealth of microbes that are really good for creating some vitamins, for example, or for breaking down certain things in your diet? And more importantly, what can we do to improve that? So if there is, for example, you look through this and you discover that there's a real lack of orange things, then what could you do with your diet that would increase the food for these orange things, so that then if you've just got one or two, they can grow? And then we look at the evidence to support that intervention, and having the evidence is where the power really comes. Now, when we're looking at a whole microbiome with potentially 28,000 species, we have to remember this is extremely complicated, and the research is developing quickly, but we are still early. The amount we will understand about the microbiome in 10 years' time is so much more than we understand today, but the amount we understand today is an awful lot more than it was 10 years ago. So there's a lot of things we do have evidence for now that can make a difference. So I hope that makes sense and covers the three different ways that we look at the microbiome. We also like stool tests to look at some of the biochemical markers. So how are your digestive enzymes? How are your inflammatory markers? To give us a real feeling as to the health of your personal microbiome, your gut, and therefore can make interventions that make a difference. Okay, we're not just doing these tests for academic interest, we're doing them to try to make a difference to your health outcomes.